February 17th meeting of the Plymouth Planning Board to order. Rebecca Hansen is not able to join us in person, and she is on Zoom, and I would like to start the meeting off by asking Rebecca, is it not reasonably practical for you to participate in person?
No.
Okay. And would you like me to chair the meeting in your absence?
Yes, please. Thank you, Phil.
All right, thank you. That being said, I will do a roll call, starting with the chair. Rebecca?
Here.
Phil here. Mike Ahern?
Here.
Zach Terrell?
Here.
Mark Sturgeon?
Here.
John Christ?
Here.
I think that's all we have. We are missing one permanent member. Sue, I'll seat you as a voting member for the meeting.
Okay.
The first item on the agenda is the minutes of February 3rd.
So there was just one little thing.
We can start with the discussion if we found errors.
Update where Mike Ahern was erroneously described as Henry Ahern. I think it was Henry Ahern was erroneously. No, it was Henry Ahern that spoke, but they had Bruce's name.
I don't
So-
know.
It said Bruce Henry or Henry Bruce.
Oh, that's,
And now I don't remember if it was Henry or Bruce.
Bruce Henry, maybe, something. Yeah, and now I can't remember who
okay.
was
We can go
actually in
back and
attendance.
Double check it, and I think it was supposed to be you that said something. We can go back and double check it, so.
That was my recollection as well,
Yeah.
is that something you said had been attributed to Henry Ahern. But,
Henry Bruce or
yeah,
Bruce Henry.
I'm not sure.
Was it Rebecca that said it? Was that?
Yeah, I think I noticed that it said either Bruce Henry or Henry Bruce.
Right, and it had nothing to do with
I think
me.
it was Henry that was there at the meeting.
And it said Bruce Henry or something, yeah, so.
As long as the minutes for the meeting that this is referencing are correct, then
These minutes are
we should
correct.
be okay.
These minutes accurately reflect what we discussed at the last meeting, even if the correction wasn't correct. Are there any other corrections to the minutes? Discussion, otherwise? I'll entertain a motion, if anybody wants one.
I make a motion to accept the minutes of the February 3 meeting.
All right. Motion. So, okay. And we have a second. So all in favor of approving the minutes as written?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, they are passed unanimously. Do we have any communications to address for this meeting?
No.
Then we are going to move straight into applications and public hearings with a continuation of the site plan application for Plymouth Professional Place, located at 77 to 81 Highland Street. The application is to reconstruct a parking lot, improve site drainage, add a new sidewalk to and from the buildings and the street, and to construct a 480 square foot garage. The property lies in the single family residential zone. June, would you like to update us with what has happened since our last meeting?
Sure. So in the pile of papers in front of you, we've been busy the last day addressing a few things. So in the packet, just stepping back, so the last meeting, the board accepted this application, had some discussion about sidewalks and a number of different things, and you agreed to wait to, not make any decisions on it until I had a chance for our town engineer, Mike Vignali, to review the plans, which he did do. He wrote a memo and sent that on February 8th. We forwarded that on to Kevin Leonard from North Point Engineering, who made revisions to the plans and sent us back revised plans yesterday. So in the interest of trying to be efficient and not delay applications too long, I've got a copy of that in front of you. And I've gone through and checked everything. It seems that the issues have been addressed, with one exception to one more change still to make, I'll cover in a second. And also with that, there's a memo from Kevin, who outlined the changes, how he responded to Mike Vignali's memo, and also requesting a waiver about the driveway, because that was an issue that Mike had brought out in his memo. The issue is that our regulations for site plan basically state that access to public streets should be in conformance with the town's rules, which are not very detailed, or with the Department of Transportation. So Mike Vignali had pointed out that typically you don't want an 8% slope, even though it's a fairly short pitch down to the road. There should come down and have a little bit more of a level, I think no more than 2% as you come onto a road. This site, currently, it's a steep slope. We've gone out and looked at it coming on. It's about an 8% grade that they're proposing, which is similar to what's there now. Basically, the site constraints are such that it makes it difficult to achieve that. So they formally are asking for a waiver of that requirement in the site plan review regulations, because it's almost impossible to do that. So I wrote you another memo just this afternoon, and I realized I didn't put in there formally addressing the waiver, so you should do that. But so basically, the town engineer then reviewed the revisions to the plans and the memo and the driveway request, and wrote back saying everything was satisfactory to him, which was great to get that this morning. So I've gone through the other questions or comments we had from the meeting and on the previous staff report. They've added in some snow storage area. They did change the sidewalk not coming down to Highland Street. We talked to that. I talked to the highway manager about it, and Mike Vignali agreed that that was not a good idea because of not having a crosswalk there. The sign has been adjusted, I believe, to be within the setback area. The one thing that did get missed in this, which Kevin acknowledged via email to me today, was on the, I believe it's sheet 5, on the, sheet 4, the actual site plan, that there is a tent there between the two buildings closest to the road that's being used by Local Foods Plymouth. And originally the idea was that was going to be removed, but they want to keep, Local Foods Plymouth is still going to, and Paray is still going to be a tenant there. So they wanted to still keep that. So they were going to just add that back in. It shows on the existing conditions plan. So they need to add that on the site plan to just acknowledge that that's there. All right. So that was one change. And then just some housekeeping. So I would recommend that, we still have to have open the public hearing and ask, and then finish the public hearing. But then after that, consider conditions of approval. I think the plan is ready for that, so
Okay.
pending any comments from the public.
All right. Are there any concerns from the board to discuss before we open this to public hearing?
Also note that the applicant, representatives from Lakes Region Mental Health and Kevin Leonard, the engineer, on this, so they may want to add any changes to it too.
Okay.
Comments?
I was just, it's a lot to absorb pretty quickly, but it looks like everything is in order in many ways now. Is the Local Foods Plymouth tent, is that going to be a long-term, we know? I mean, is it going to be like another year, or is that going to be something that's going to last like long-term?
I would let the applicant inform you about what their plans are there,
Okay.
so maybe we can ask them. Looks like Sunshine's ready to speak, so.
I would be happy to entertain, if the applicant would like to address that, please.
We currently have a one-year lease
Okay.
in place. The building was intended to eventually become part of our service offering, so I don't look at this as being something that would be there into perpetuity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions from the board at this point? Hearing none, I'm going to reopen the public hearing, continued from our last meeting. It is now 6:41. If there are any members of the public who'd like to speak to this, please come use the microphone.
Hi, I'm Frank Miller,
Hi, Frank.
and in support of this application to update this property and make it more efficient and effective in our business community. And I'd like to see it approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to comment at this time? No? All right. 6:41, I will close the public hearing and ask the board how we'd like to move forward at this point. Do we want to vote on, is there a formal waiver that we need to accept, or have they just asked us to waive that requirement of our regulations in considering the application?
I would suggest you, since Kevin Leonard's on Zoom, if he has anything to add that I missed, then maybe you could ask him that and then move towards addressing the waiver.
No. I do see that, we do have a letter dated February 16th from Kevin Leonard that the third paragraph does address the grades. Mr. Leonard, would you like to discuss this at all? It seems to me that it's an existing condition and you're not making it worse. Is that a correct assumption?
I think that's an excellent sort of summary. I guess the one thing I would add is that we are trying to improve the whole parking lot and the driveway. Right now, the curb cut off of Highland Street is very wide. We're narrowing that down to something more traditional. We're also, all the drainage from the hillside is, kind of free flowing down to the roadway now. And part of these site improvements are to add curbing and closed drainage to try to collect some of that runoff and get it into a closed drainage system. We worked with the highway department to tie those improvements into the system that's in the street. And we're proposing to put vertical granite curb down around to this, and match into the street. So I would argue that we're improving the situation while we don't meet the generally accepted grades that you would want off with a new driveway. In all other ways, we're improving the existing situation.
Are there any other concerns from the board that we should address? We have accepted this as complete. We've got updated information that's been submitted since our last application, our last discussion.
I'm just trying to.
Hey, Phil, did you say we haven't accepted
Sorry.
the application as complete?
No, we did accept the application as complete prior to the opening of the hearing at our last meeting. So
Okay.
it's already, we have more information, but we have not decided on the application, I guess.
So just to clarify, so I'm just trying to read point number 4 here in
Which letter?
the letter from Kevin Leonard. So for the handicap parking, it's the same sort of issue. We're still not quite meeting it, but we're getting as best we can within the existing conditions. That's the same situation then.
That's my understanding. Kevin may want to comment because he's the one that, looked at that.
Yes, you're right. It's basically the same situation. You've got a site that's sloping, 8 to 10% the whole way up, and you've got fixed building fences, and obviously the street's the elevation it's at. So we're sort of constrained by the conditions, and we're trying to make it, improve it in all other ways to make it as conforming as possible. And as I mentioned in my letter, internally in my office, we had some discussion about that. I wanted to make sure that we were doing the right thing, and we reached out to the New Hampshire Governor's Commission on Disability to make sure that they felt what we're proposing is adequate, and they advised that they thought that we were doing the right thing, and that in some cases in existing conditions, you can't make it perfect.
Okay, thank you.
I don't mean to talk too much, but so because we had some fast and furious changes in these things just in the last 24 hours or so trying to address this and other things with the other application, I realized this memo that I wrote that the board has, I did not get it to the applicant because we just finished it maybe an hour ago. So I just emailed it to them so they can see, because there's a list of potential conditions of approval there if the board gets to that point. So I wanted to acknowledge that you have it, but they haven't seen it, so. So I think the steps are for the board to formally acknowledge the waiver request and decide on that, if you accept that, and then for the slope, and then consider what you want to do for action on it.
So we don't actually have a written waiver, it's just kind of a request of a discussion of.
Oh, did you not get a copy? There should have been another, yes, there was a specific.
Is there? Is it one of
It's
these?
right there.
Is it one of these?
There's 2 letters from North Point. Sorry, I can.
Oh,
One
here
is
it is,
the
driveway waiver.
response to
Okay.
Mike Vignali's comments and his description of how they revised the plans, and the second one is the official request for the waiver for the driveway slope. People see that? You get that?
Okay. So, yeah, so we do have, the letter dated February 16th is a waiver request for the driveway grades.
Yes. And then the other one's actually dated the 15th. My apologies for not.
15th? The 16th?
I have a.
Oh, here it is.
Hey, Phil,
Yes.
I don't have access to all the fresh documents. I think I got the 2 memos, but I don't have the letter from, the letter that's dated the 15th, the request for waiver. I'm happy to just hear it summarized, or if June can email it to me really quickly, that would be helpful.
I think June is in the process of emailing it. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
So Phil,
Yes.
this is a state-maintained road, Highland Street, correct? It's town-maintained?
Town Road. Yes.
So what has Joe said about the waiver?
He deferred to Mike's Vignali's opinion about it and thought it was reasonable, the way it was being designed, so.
I'm not an engineer, but the only thing I could think that would be an engineering solution to this would be to have a flat driveway that came back from the road, but then had a steeper grade that went up, but that would require an elevated parking, like a retaining wall with an elevated parking limit, so that the parking lot was flat. And I don't think that would suit the character of town. You know, I suspect that if there were easy engineering solutions, we would have seen one by now. I think the way they've proposed this certainly improves upon what's there. But, you know, there's certainly limitations to the site. That's my opinion.
So if we agree with this procedurally, do we need a motion to accept the waiver?
Yes.
I move we accept the waiver for the driveway grade.
How about approve?
Approve the waiver, yes. Sorry.
That's
I
okay.
move we approve the waiver for the driveway grade.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve the written waiver that was requested, acknowledging that the driveway grades exceed our guidelines for driveways as established in town zoning and site plan regulations. Is there any discussion? Mike?
I'm trying to see where Kevin's comments were right now.
June, do you have?
Not
can you point
Mike
me to it?
Vignali's
I
comments.
did not make a copy of that. I mean, they got emailed to you, so I did not make another copy of it, but I have it here. I want to-
Because that's all up and down Highland Street. There's so much.
So this is where he wrote saying that they had met his comments, and this was originally his comments there.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's, and then Kevin's response is
And
there.
then,
And then, so it came, yeah.
Rebecca, have you had time to read the waiver request?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I see what,
Are you comfortable with?
you took care of what
Okay.
I was concerned about.
All right. So I will call for a vote on the motion to approve the waiver. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye, sorry.
Sorry, was that in favor or opposed?
That was in favor, sorry.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion to pass the waiver is unanimous, approved unanimously. I think the only thing we have on the table, we do have a list of suggested conditions of approval if we were to consider approving this tonight. Would anyone like to move forward with that, or should we continue the hearing pending other information?
Do we have that?
That should be a memo from me.
On February
There's two
17th.
memos, not that one, the other.
Not this one. Oh, yeah, look at yours. Oh, thank you.
Need a copy of it.
I don't think I have this one, okay.
So Phil, since this was something that the applicant just received today, I'd like to hear what their response is to these potential conditions.
Conditions. John, could I borrow that? Thank you. Since I don't believe the applicant has seen these, so our planning staff has recommended a list of conditions of approval. I'd like to read them, and if you, and then allow the applicant to comment. The first condition of approval recommended is that the applicant should submit revised plans showing the existing tent on the site plan. A full set, one full set, one 11 by 17, and one electronic set of revised plans should be submitted. The applicant shall sign a development agreement with the town. The applicant shall post surety for the site reclamation with the amount to be determined by the engineer, the applicant's engineer and the town's engineer. The applicant agrees to provide funds to be held in escrow account to cover construction inspection by the town's engineer. The applicant is responsible for coordinating with the highway department for the necessary trench permits, presumably for connection of drainage. Applicant is responsible for coordinating with Plymouth Village Water and Sewer for any necessary permits. The approval is granted until July 1, 2023, unless another date is agreed to. The project must be completed by this date. I would suggest that we add that an extension must be requested in writing 30 days prior to that date if one is sought. And as-built plans must be submitted within 30 days of the completed construction. So those are the conditions of approval that have been recommended to us. Kevin, do you have any issues with those, or Sunshine, are there any issues if we were to move forward with those?
All of those sound fairly straightforward to me. I guess the one thing that I know was a discussion last meeting, and I've talked to the applicant about, is we've identified the garage in the back to be a phase 2. The intent is they want to do it, it just financially it may need to be done in steps. And I think we're looking to have a 2-year window to do that, kind of give us the full construction season next year. I think the plan is to get the parking lot done this year, if all goes as planned.
So
That is the hope, Kevin.
if we were to give you a date of March 1st, 2024, would that be sufficient to move forward? And then you could always request an extension if you weren't going to hit that?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
You want to give them a couple more months than March? Because it's,
They said 2 years.
okay.
That's my. It's I think we can. It would be fairly easy for us to extend. Would you like longer than 2 years?
Sure. Our fiscal year ends in June 30th, so maybe June 30th?
June 30, 2024. June is that. would that make enforcement difficult for the other elements of the plan? I mean, so it seems that most of the elements of the construction are probably going to be done pretty quickly, but if the only thing holding it up is the garage, are you concerned about any other aspects of that being a problem for?
Why don't we say in the last one, as-built plans submitted within 30 days of completion of construction of each phase? So if they get the parking lot done this year, I think that would help us to have just verification of what was installed, and they're not having to chase that down a year later, okay? And then they can add in that basically the footprint of the garage will be on there, and then they would just get a building permit for that, so I think that would work. Okay.
And Phil,
Yes.
I like that idea, just so if the garage never happens, we still end up with an end product for the site as well.
30 days of completion of the construction of the parking lot.
Kevin, are you okay with providing an as-built when the parking lot is done, even if the garage is not done?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yep.
Okay, all right.
So I make a motion that we approve the applicant's application with the 9 conditions, with number 8 to be changed, providing for a building permit after the driveway is completed, the parking lot is completed.
So you're okay with the conditions of approval as I just read them?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I second that.
Is there any discussion? Clarifications, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the site plan for Lake Region Mental Health Center signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's approved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your help.
Thank you for your support.
Next one, we have a new site plan review application for Mid-State Community Development Corporation for the property at 26 to 38 Main Street. The application is to change the use of a commercial building previously used as a bank and corporate offices. The new proposed use is a medical office facility, including same-day clinic, imaging center, and occupational physical therapy center. Significant alterations will be made to the interior and exterior teller window, and drive-through lane will be enclosed. The property lies within the village commercial zone. Jim, would you want to introduce this at all? Would we ask the applicant to?
I can start to try to explain a couple things that have changed with it too. So, in the email package a week ago, you got a set of the plans, the application form, and a staff report that actually Joseph worked hard on. So, in that interim time over the last week, we dug a little further into a couple things based on some comments we were hearing and further review of the plan. So, I've given you a memo tonight. You have a hard copy of the actual plans where it has a little bit of coloring on it, and I believe you have a copy of the original staff report dated February 11th, and then a second one, that's the one with the town logo on it, dated today. And again, I just literally an hour before the meeting finished this and have not sent it to the applicant, but we can go over these items, I think, after they do a presentation of let them explain what this is about, and decide if you want to accept the application. We can go over some of the details.
Is there a representative of the applicant who'd like to speak to the plans?
Chris Solomon, I think, is the representative.
Good evening. Chris Solomon, Sim Delia Architects, over here in Holderness, New Hampshire. We also have Bob McLeod from Mid-State, Kent Brown, civil engineer, Kevin Baum, and then also a citizen and a property owner in town, also Alex Ray, is here tonight with us. So just an overview, and I'm happy to share my screen and we can go through the plans if needed, but the plan is for, we're going to be renovating the existing bank facility to accommodate Mid-State Health Clinic and Diagnostic Center. That Diagnostic Center will support 12 exam rooms. In the facility, we also have an imaging center, which includes CT scan, MRI, X-ray, and ultrasound. Also, within an existing tenant space to the right of the plan on the building is a PT and OT center. This center is going to have an estimated 7 practitioners and 5 support staff working at the facility daily. And it's expected to serve roughly 5 patrons per hour, or 40 people per day visiting the facility. This existing facility, in the site plan, we're not proposing any changes to the existing parking lot, drainage, the main entryway. We do know that you guys are proposing some renovations in downtown. There's going to be some regrading that's going to need to happen. We understand that there, in front of the building, there is no granite curbing at the time. At this time, and you're expecting to introduce that curbing, which we're happy to work with you guys on. The existing parking lot has roughly 49 parking spaces to accommodate those 12 staff members. Again, exterior improvements, we're not proposing any improvements to the front side of the building. There is an existing teller window, a drive-through that we're going to be infilling. That already has an existing roof on it and a foundation structure supporting that roof. Interior improvements, again, we're going to be renovating the inside of the building to accommodate that new Mid-State Health Clinic and Diagnostic Center. Utilities, we're going to have roughly, right now we're connected to town water and sewer. That will remain. And overall, we're proposing to start construction this coming summer, and it would take roughly 6 to 8 months for that construction. So that's kind of the overview. I don't know if you wanted to look at the site plan in depth, and we can walk through that. I'm happy to share my screen, and we can present that.
Anybody have any questions at this point? If you'd like to share your screen and walk us through your proposed changes, that would be great.
Open that up. And Ken, feel free to step in as needed. All right, so here we have can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great. So here's the existing bank facility. Here, what we are proposing, and we'll jump over to the architectural plans in a moment. There's an existing main entrance here, which comes off the sidewalk off of Main Street. That you come into the building and you flow throughout the building here. The site is accommodated with 25 parking spaces, again, off of Main Street. 25 parking spaces here. There is an upper lot with 14 parking spaces. There is some drainage issues coming from Highland Street up above, which we'll address in the presentation in a little bit. So those 14 parking spaces plus the 25 would serve for both faculty and those patrons visiting the facility. Again, this is really an existing conditions plans. We're not proposing any changes other than we are aware that you guys will be doing some work. Let's see if I can can't annotate, but here along Main Street it's from what our initial conversations with the town is you guys will be introducing some new curbing and updating the sidewalks along Main Street. To the side of the building, again next to the neighboring property, we have another 10 parking spaces. This is where that existing bank teller window is. It's currently a roof structure with supporting building underneath. So we will be infilling that, and we're proposing 2 new 3-yard dumpsters in back of that, screened from Main Street, as well as those to be fenced outside. So that's really the exterior of the building. We do have an existing plan showing all of the drainage that was constructed in 2006. So this engineering was done by Horizons Engineering. This does show all of the drainage on the upper end of the site, how that then flows down towards Main Street, and again, the drainage plan for the lower parking lot here. Any questions on the site plan?
Anyone? Mike, go ahead.
And then,
Are you, you said you're proposing, Mike Ahern here, you said you're proposing to keep the 10 spaces on the south end of the building?
yes, these 10 spaces over here would be kept. There is an existing ramp here that comes into the building. So the plan would be, this would be faculty and staff parking. They would come in, up this ramp, an ADA ramp, and then into the building.
So you're probably aware that downtown Plymouth has severe limitations on parking for businesses, for the business owners and their employees. Do you anticipate having extra parking spaces that you might allow people to park there during the day or evening?
Yes, we are aware that there are significant parking issues in downtown. This plan in the program here, we're not anticipating needing any on-street parking to accommodate the needs of the building. It'll all be accommodated with extra parking would accommodate all of the needs of the building. We do know that there's some after-hours events, both with the theater down the road and the restaurants across the street that does use some of that parking currently. We're not saying no, we don't want anybody to park on that parking lot. I don't think we want to formally offer that tonight, but we do know that is taking place currently, and we're willing to work with the town with that, or with those business owners.
Was there any talk about Gould Terrace? Obviously, I'm not sure if you're aware, was a road at one point, and the bank asked us, back when I was on the planning board many years ago, 15 years ago, asked us to eliminate Gould Terrace, and they introduced the steps. Have you thought about making your formal entrance rather than the roadside, maybe the back part, and utilizing more of the upper parking lot as your main parking, and possibly allowing a number of the spots down by Main Street to be, and I'm only mentioning that because I'm not sure if you're, and this has nothing to do with what the planning board here is looking at, but if there's ever going to be an application to not pay property taxes, whether that's something we can look at in advance.
I don't think we can condition our consideration of this application on the tax exempt status of the applicant.
Right.
I would suggest that we not even discuss that.
So my question was, have you looked at using the back parking lot as more of the formal main entrance versus the front parking lot?
Yeah, so that's an interesting idea. This back parking lot is still a level above this space here. So I guess we got another in the waiting room. Let's just ask if I could let him in. I just let Steve Rand into the meeting, just to
Thank
let
you.
you know. Yeah, so this parking lot it's located a story above, well, more than a story above. So from an ADA standpoint, we would need to build structure and elevators and essentially a whole new building to accommodate that. So I think just due to grading, that would be prohibitive. It's also, we're looking to accommodate the healthcare needs of downtown and have this be an amenity for our local community, which is part of the reason why Midstate has purchased this building in downtown with street frontage on Main Street, is to really be a patron of Main Street and a steward of this building in south of Main Street and be part of the community and not be entering in off the back parking lot.
I understand your question, but, you know, it's,
I'm planting a seed is all.
no, I know, I understand. It's
I
just-
want them to
it's
be
the
aware.
honest- It's still private property and, you know, the parking, you know, how they choose to manage their parking is their resource. I don't think we should be conditioning our.
Oh, no, no
consideration of
condition,
their
just
application. Right.
offering
No, I.
my thoughts.
Okay,
And I have some further comments
Please.
about the parking lots
Yep.
later, but let's first get through whether you want to accept it or not.
yeah,
So I do have a few more things to go through.
thanks, Chris. Go ahead.
Just to present. So back to the existing parking lot. As you'll see here, you know, there is, we do have drainage on the upper portion of the parking. We have documented, there's some issues, which I think all this is going to be solved with your upcoming renovations of Russell Street, but there is some flow that's happening, that's coming down across the property from the streets above and from the neighboring property, which has come across and is clogging up some of the drains. That Midstate has cleared those, and that the main water there is coming in kind of across the property from above. But again, I think all of these issues are going to be solved this summer with your upcoming construction on Russell Street. So we are aware of that, and we're looking forward to working with the town as you guys undertake your construction process to fix that. So that's really kind of the main scope of the project. You know, we know that you guys are going to be doing some work here in the summer, so we're all going to, you know, we're going to need to work with you on that. And overall, you know, our parking needs are being met by the existing facility, and we're looking forward to being part of downtown.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Does the board had time to review the plans and the comments from planning staff at this
So
point?
I did look over some of this material before the meeting, but that was whatever was sent to us. And as far as accepting the application, it does look, to me at least, complete. Approving is another story, and from what was just said, I mean, a condition of approval, I don't know if it's on there or not, but we might talk about what's happening this summer and how that might be coordinated as a condition. But that's the next step, I suppose. But it looks, I'm not making a motion yet, but it looks ready to accept, I think.
You want me to go over some of the history that we found? In the,
Sure.
just before you, just I think for clarity, so while our file keeping here takes some time to dig through and clean it out and put everything in order and understand what's happened in the past, but on the staff report that you received dated February 11th, it outlines a few things. So most recently, while the building was, I guess, originally constructed in 1920, there was a couple things over time. In 1988, a variance was actually granted to allow a sign in the front setback, so that sign is shown in that location. They're not proposing to change it, so there is an existing variance for that. In 1995, a site plan approval was granted to add the drive-through canopy and the parking spaces on the south end. You should be aware that there's actually two lots here. I don't think that was clearly explained. Lot 110-41 is 28 Main Street where the building is, and then the other lot is the two parking lots, the one up above and down below, and that's 110-46. So, or maybe I got that wrong. Nope, I think I got that right. So on 110-46 is the parking area, and that was approved, two approvals actually of special exception to have a parking facility in the village commercial zone back in 2006, as well as there was also, I believe, a variance to have parking within the setback area, and then also a site plan to construct that parking area, the upper one, and maybe make some changes down below. So that 2006 is the second plan that Chris just showed you, all right? And we did dig that out and find that in the files after some finagling around with it. And also with that 2006 was a two-story addition on that north end, I believe, of the building. Okay. So couple thoughts that I had, where we can get into some of the aspects, but they are proposing the lighting, landscaping, basically to all stay pretty much the same. And more interior renovations. I just want to remind the planning board that, yeah, they had architectural kind of sketches and drawings of how the layout of the building would be, but the planning board's job is to look at the exterior, not the interior layout. And so I just, yeah, the main key points are there's this 2006 plan and their plan, and then I have some further comments about it would be nice to see the full drainage incorporated on the current plan, and I can comment more about that later.
I think you had some comments about the traffic flow with converting the drive-through as well.
Yep, so that, again, the information's there, we can discuss after you decide to accept it, any modifications and changes to it. I think your next job is to determine if it's complete and you want to accept it, and
I make a motion that we accept that the application is complete.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the application as complete. Is there any discussion of the motion? Any questions before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the application as complete?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the board has voted unanimously to accept the application as complete. Does the board want to discuss anything before we open a public hearing on this? Would the applicant like to say anything before we open a public hearing at this point?
do you want me to go through, before the public hearing, further comments I have about drainage and that?
Yes.
Sign,
Yeah.
you know, because maybe the public will want to
Yeah,
hear that.
That may trigger questions, so that's a good idea. Go ahead.
So, and I can try to keep this fairly short, but yes, the drainage is a problem there, all right? And I dug into some of the notes today about this, and I was also curious about the history of Gould Terrace. So, the Gould Terrace originally extended down where that stairway is, basically. All right, it came down from Russell Street and made a bend and came down right next to the building, kind of in between the building and the parking lot where the stairs
There
are.
was a road that came
There was a
down there?
road that went down there.
You're kidding.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
Not even really that long ago.
Gould Terrace would have paralleled Main Street.
Yeah, no, I thought it did and came out, but anyway, we found the old plan. We have a copy of it here in front of it if you really want to.
So I
See
was on
that.
the planning board at the
Yeah.
time when they came through to do that.
That was a good call.
So there was a bunch of changes made in that addition of the parking lot in the town in 2006, at town meeting, actually, the town voted to discontinue the road and then revert the ownership back to the property, the abutting owners, which was Community Guarantee Savings Bank at the time. I did find a letter in the file that Community Guarantee agreed to maintain the steps in the winter for the use of the public. And that's not been happening, so that was mentioned to me that the steps have not been maintained in the public. So maybe the current owner isn't aware of that or hasn't been honoring that, so that should maybe be discussed. There was interesting in the 2006 notice of decision from the site plan for the addition in that upper parking lot, that it very clearly stated that there should be a 25-foot wide easement across the entire width of the parking lot to provide public access to and from future parking lots planned between Gould Terrace and Webster Street. There's always been some ideas of having a parking lot go on that sort of mid-level between Russell and, obviously there's ownership issues behind there, but for many years that's been discussed. So the idea was to maintain an easement through there. There's no record of any easement ever being done, but that was a conditional of approval in 2006. So I think the board should consider
Requesting the formal-
how to make that fulfilled. We did get comments from Plymouth Village Water and Sewer. They had some fairly lengthy that I didn't want to go into. It's really up to them to assess this change of use, and if that changes the need for different types of water lines, backflow preventer, fire suppression, if there's different requirements, and also the sewage leaving, if they're, given the nature of a medical facility, if there's any. So that's really their purview to look at, but the applicant should check with them. On that area, this was on kind of the first, I didn't put much on it in my new memo today, but on the February 11th memo or staff report, we mentioned that curb cut on the, went back in whatever year it was when they approved 95, I guess, the drive-through and the parking spaces on the south end. Given that that drive-through is being closed, there's no longer a drive-through there, it's always good to minimize curb cuts, especially on Main Street for pedestrian safety. So I was going to suggest that perhaps that parking lot, rather than angled parking, could be straight in parking, some little bit of work there with a redesign. And then when we do our new project on Main Street, we could close off that exit by the drive-through to just get a little bit more pedestrian safety through there, because otherwise it's got a fair amount of opening there. And certainly across the street, there's problems around 7-Eleven. So that was a suggested thing to talk to them about. And then, but lastly, the real, so the idea of parking too. So this is, again, two sites, one with the building and one with the approved parking facility that happens to serve this building. I wanted to point out that the zoning ordinance does not require any on-site parking in the village commercial zone. This applicant does need to go and get a special exception to have a medical facility in the village commercial zone. And in reviewing the criteria for a special exception, any review of is there adequate parking or any strain on town services, it would be more in the purview of the zoning board to review that, because this is indeed compliant with the zoning as proposed until they, at least, but they need that special exception. All right. So then going to the drainage issues, we know that there's problems in front of this. I met with the building inspector, and I met with the Kent Brown, who's the engineer that provided the plan and this year's plan, not the 2006 one, but and we met with Chris Solomon and Kent and mentioned drainage problems. There's a lot of water that comes down that hill, and they do show catch basins on this Brown Engineering plan in that upper parking lot, but there's no pipe connecting those catch basins. It shows on the 2006 plan, but not on this current one. And we have no knowledge if those catch basins are functioning, because we know from that photo, which I provided to them, that there's been a lot of gravel and sediments going into that parking lot. In addition, I also had told them it was my understanding there's some kind of pump system behind the building, probably behind that two-story addition, and I had gotten that from a previous employee of the bank who said that they had had to install some kind of exterior pumping system to keep water away from the building, to keep the building dry. And it was expensive and a lot to maintain. And so that is not shown on the plan. We have no idea where that pumps water to. All right. So all that said, it's my opinion that there's inadequate amount of detail about the existing drainage shown on this plan, based on the review of the 2006 versus this current 2022 plan. So I think the board should consider asking for more details, where this pump is, how it's working, and where does all this water go. It is the responsibility on site to build and maintain sites in accordance with approved plan. So what was approved in 2006, we need to know it's been maintained and functions properly. In addition, yes, we have this major infrastructure project coming up very shortly that's going to help eliminate water coming from Russell Street down this hillside to Main, because it's going to direct it in a different direction. Will it remove all of it? No, because there's going to be some between Russell and this area. I would suggest that, this plan needs more review on that drainage to ensure that what there is working, and that we don't spend, the town's investing all this effort into Main Street and this drainage project, and we don't want to have a site not functioning properly as it connects to that, given the amount of investment in engineering and work that we're doing with it. So that's a lot to kind of explain, but hopefully, it's kind of a piece of the puzzle, and sites need to operate properly. So we are designing a system based on what we know about it, but if it isn't working there, we don't know.
So, Mike, I have a question about the logistics of our site plans. When they filed the site plan for parking, was that an amendment to the existing site plan for the bank, or was it a site plan that was approved independently for the parking facility to be associated with the bank?
I think it was actually in conjunction with the addition on the bank, so it went kind of one site plan for 2 lots, as is this one too, actually. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is the 2006 plan, actually, that Chris is still sharing here, so it's got that addition and the associated bank and the stairway coming down through there.
Okay, so we are dealing with one site plan for,
Yeah, because it's,
2
this
tax
site
lots.
is, yeah,
okay.
parking facility serving this change of
My
use.
only question was that if they had filed the site plan for the parking independently and the 2 were approved independently, I would wonder if we had any authority to require a change on a site plan that wasn't under consideration. So some towns treat
Yep.
tax lots as sites, and
Yep.
if they're not proposing changes there, I would wonder if we had the ability to ask them to do anything about that.
Well, they presented it as in conjunction with
Okay.
2 lots in there, so that's, and you accepted it that way, so,
Okay.
in essence, that got the ball rolling on that one. And again, even if it wasn't, this parking area wasn't included in the change of use for the building, in our review of the drainage on there, it kind of brings us up to dig into old plans and say, hey, if this isn't been built and maintained in accordance to the plan, then you need to fix it, so.
Right. I support. Is the drainage issue, is it originating off-site and then,
I think he said it was coming from across the street, up above.
that's one of my questions, is this site the recipient of uncontrolled
Yes.
drainage from a different site?
Street has no drainage. And everything runs
Russell
down.
Street? Okay.
Without, I've got lots of diagrams I could show you
Sure.
about the Russell Street, Main Street, it's too
Yeah.
much to get into, but the Russell Street portion of the town's project will help capture water on Russell Street area, but not anything below Russell Street, between Russell and Main.
Right.
But there is definitely water, we know that, in this area coming down that hillside, that should be coming, because there's no place for it to go in
And
Russell
there's a
Street.
question if the drainage basins in the upper lot are plumbed into an appropriate drain at Main Street. Is that the
Their
connection
current plan
question?
does not tell us where it goes, those upper,
Okay.
it just shows catch basins with no pipes underneath.
And, like, in theory, it could be an infiltration basin that was intended to just allow water to slowly
We have
sink
no
in,
as-built
too.
plan, we
Right.
have, yeah.
Okay.
He's gonna show you a letter from Andrews Construction that was written yesterday, saying that they built it in accordance, as far as they know. But, the site plan from 2006, the notice of decision for that site plan says that they were supposed to do everything, to the satisfaction of the town and the drainage, and it's still it's one of the major problems of flooding in Main Street is that in front of there. I mean, a former employee of the bank, or a employee of the bank that, when they used to be there, told me they can sometimes kayak down the street, and maybe tomorrow morning we can.
So that would be, just to clarify, that's on Main Street here, which you do have some issues in the road here with the topography and the way that the road is sloping. Again, that's being caused off-site from here.
Yeah.
And then we do, on the drainage system it's for the building has a basement. It has perimeter drains, as any building does. And those perimeter drains feed into a pump in the basement and are pumped out into the town stormwater system. So that's just a standard sump pump in the basement. The pumps themselves are located outside in a manhole so that they can be accessed and changed out if needed. But that, you do have some drainage issues, which is the reason why you guys are going to be doing that fairly large infrastructure project this summer. And then we do have this existing plan that shows where the drainage goes in terms of the piping. And then a letter from Andrews, the president, Buddy Crane, who has a fairly essentially an outstanding reputation. And he said it's built for the plans, and anything more than that would kind of be on the, I'm sure that the town did inspections during construction and certified that work was done properly. But again, we don't have the records of the town proving that. We just have You know, the letter and the drawings from 2006 when that work was completed.
We have no as-built plan that I've been able to locate. So.
Mike?
I would have one more comment about parking. I didn't know if on the south side of the building, you've got 10 spots, and then down the center of the parking, and we've got 2 entrances onto South Main Street. If you could make the entrance in the center of that parking spot, you could put 10 spaces on either side if you could find a different spot for the dumpsters.
Well, that building is going to be, the drive-through is going to be enclosed to be an addition, so they're not getting rid of that. That's going to be permanent. That was what he mentioned earlier.
We also
that
don't have, you would need, say, 20 feet, and then another 40 feet, and then another 20 feet. So fortunately, we've got this property line here. The adjacent property owner, their dumpsters are in this back corner, which again is not on this property. And there's not enough of depth here to accommodate 2 layers of parking and be able to get in and get out.
All right.
Thank you. So this project is going to require a special exception, as we already discussed. That does not require a vote of this board for them to move forward with that. So they can move forward with the special exception request with the zoning board. Are there any other? I would like to open up the public hearing I would like to open the public hearing at some point.
I have one other quick question.
Yep. Go ahead.
June, how is the usage of those stairs and the maintenance of those stairs, how is that memorialized? Like, where's that captured?
Sorry, all I've seen is a letter from, I think, the former president of the Community Guarantee Savings Banks offering to the town that they would do winter maintenance. So there was never any formal.
So there was nothing formal when that road was closed. No right of way was put in there. Nothing like that.
I'm aware of. Yeah.
When the town deeded it back to the abutter, it became private property. So I mean, it would be
right. But it seems like that would have been the time to make that some sort of right of way, so that the pedestrians at least could still travel through that path. But
there are a couple things in the deeds and that kind of thing that I think need some more research about that. But when that Gould Terrace was given up, but only had so much time.
Liability.
Is the applicant willing to include a statement on the site plan that maintenance of the stairs would be the responsibility of the applicant or site owner?
Yes.
Thank you. That seems pretty easy.
Hey, Phil, I've got a couple comments before you open up the public hearing, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
So getting back to that 2 curb cuts on the parking lot on the south side, I would echo June's comments that getting rid of one of those curb cuts, I think, would be a great idea. And we might get a couple more on-street parking spots out of that. I mean, I think it's hard for us to, and maybe not quite appropriate for us to ask the applicant to provide more public parking, but if we do close off that curb cut, we might get 1 or 2 more spaces based on my just sort of eyeballing it from my screen here. And also the angled in parking, if you want to see how well that functions or how it doesn't function, just take a look at how it looks at Peppercorn or what used to be True Colors Printing. It's really difficult to use that angled nose in parking when you have to back around more than 180 degrees to get your car out of the spot. So looking at that, to me, that just doesn't function super well.
So if I can, Chris, maybe you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but it looks like the way the parking is currently laid out, you would pull in on the south side of that driveway, pull into an angled spot, and then when you back out, you would drive around the back of the lot and then exit on the northern half of that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if that were, is that an area where you would consider reconfiguring that parking to eliminate a curb cut?
I think we would be amenable to, you know, working with the town as the engineering progresses for downtown, but tonight I don't want to commit to, you know, restriping without, we need to do our own measurements and see how this is all going to work. So I'd rather not have that be part of this, you know, arrangement this evening, just because we don't know if that's actually going to work. So I'd rather, you know, review that first.
You know, I just wonder if we get more space by just putting the spots on the south side of the
I was
lot
wondering
there.
about that as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how we would, just knowing the width and what's required by the town for parking, pulling in, backing out, as well as being able to have a truck come in and service the dumpsters. Again, we're open to working with the town as their engineering progresses, but to redesign this tonight we just can't commit to that.
Sorry, I wouldn't ask you to redesign it on the fly during a meeting.
I guess I would just underline, Phil, if I can jump in again, just underlining the importance, I think if this is supposed to be staff parking, you know, so not as many trips in and out. I just think having fewer curb cuts is a better idea in this part of Main Street. There's definitely areas that are not safe to walk as a pedestrian in that area, and there are just multiple curb cuts in on that stretch of street. So.
Also, in that area, the thrift store, don't they come out from the back and enter into that parking lot? And is that going to be closed off or continued and allowed? And it's kind of dead space between the building and the property line. There's your extra 40 feet to add an extra 10 parking spots.
Well, it seems like this is probably going to be continued, so we should maybe start to figure out a list of things that we want to have looked at, like parking.
And a public hearing too, and then
Yeah.
if you choose to
Can
continue the public hearing from that.
If we could just jump back to, you know, right now we have 49 parking spaces, which is going to provide parking for 12 staff members and 5 patrons. And that's really the need of this building and what we're asking to be approved tonight. We're really not looking to redesign the parking lot to accommodate the town's needs for other businesses and other property owners. We know that we have a role as a community member. This is an asset to the south of Main Street. But for approval of this, we would look to just look at the merits of this project and the parking requirements needed for this project.
I would like to open the public hearing and accept comments from the public. So it being 7:38, I will open the floor and ask any members of the public who'd like to speak to this for, against, or ask questions that this would be an appropriate time.
Frank Miller. I wholeheartedly support this application, and it would add to our mix, to our business infrastructure on Main Street. With respect to the parking and the ways, that was Jim Heal's garage before it was the bank. That was what the terminus of the road was from Gould Terrace that came all the way down to Main Street. It was subsequently shut off, put the stairs in. The bank granted that right-of-way and cutting off Gould Terrace over to the Plymouth Inn site for the purpose of a possibility of making multi-level parking. And we had that since 2000, and we've been trying to utilize the Plymouth Inn site, which is owned by this town, into a parking system. And we've just not been able to connect with the business community of the citizens. One issue, of course, drainage. There are no drainage culverts on Russell Street. The only one is down by the end by Highland Street. So all that water that comes down that hill is sheet drain down Plymouth Terrace and Gould Terrace and then keeps right on down to all those businesses along Main Street on that side of the road. The issue with this utilization of the land, I think, was two properties. One, of course, with the road there, your parking on north side was a separate property, as I used to have my truck serviced at Jim Hill's garage. So, but the process for changing this use is a good use for that building, and it fits our business structure for Main Street. And I believe the parking issue, I don't believe this person the applicant has an obligation to solve abutters' issues with parking. And we've had several opportunities to utilize things from this property that we didn't take up. So I don't think we should encumber it with any external obligations of parking. And the drainage is ongoing. That roadway from Gould Terrace over was actually a way that was put in back in the 1800s. All the houses on Russell Street, their front doors face Main Street and not Russell Street, because that was the main thoroughfare way of getting to Main Street, just as a piece of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Would anyone else from the in-person public like to speak at this point? Is there anyone online who'd like to speak? Alex, go ahead. Hi.
Yeah. Good evening. This is Alex Ray, resident of Holderness, but a businessman of Plymouth. Just a couple of thoughts, and I guess one of them is I hope that we support this move, and there's a couple of things that I like about it. One is beneficial to, frankly, my business, which is the theater, and there being some lots that are accommodating parking, and 95% of the events we have are at night, and the town is pretty empty, but it's very convenient and nice for us to have the available parking being used for us because it's empty at night. And so far, it's been a very good relationship. The other thing is that having a facility downtown to maybe offer some of the medical services to people like the students at the university or people downtown that might not even have transportation. This is a good use of that building, I think, and I'm just glad to see it used in a way that the town could benefit from, because it would be an outpatient place, not like the hospital to handle its more serious cases, which is what they do. So I look forward to having it, and that's about it from me.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else online who'd like to speak to the application at hand? Considering this application is, is there someone? Oh. Hi, Steve. Steve, do you want to join us?
Yeah. Hi, sorry. I'm actually sitting next to Alex. We're both in Texas, and he's and we're okay. Can you hear me okay now?
Yep. Go ahead.
Can I be heard?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So, only thing I want to say is every time we come up against this issue about parking facilities for individual properties in Plymouth, we're always trying to wheedle around the question that, on the one hand, our zoning ordinance, it doesn't require anything. And on the other hand, our town isn't actually providing anything. So, of course, that is a giant limitation for the growth of our central business district. Honestly, I think I'd love to see some work on us providing public parking, additional public parking, so that this will be less of a problem, and we will actually be able to go through these so that we can actually develop more businesses. Because right now we're kind of like hitting businesses against businesses. You know, Ladders uses Main Street very successfully and intensely in certain times of the day. And I don't know. I'm guessing that if there's going to be a conflict, that's going to be between Ladders and the Sphere in that particular location. It's not Mid-State. Sorry. So, be that as it may, the problem that we have is of efficient capacity for parking. And if the planning board could address that question and focus on that question, that would be very much desired by all the participants, including the town, because eventually it all comes out in what's going to be available for tax revenues and all that sort of thing. Businesses have to be successful in order to be able to, in order to make their business property valuable, to make their tax payments high. Pretty simple math. So thanks for letting me add that.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other members of the public online or in person who would like to speak at this point? Okay. So we have an option. Do we want to make a decision on this tonight? If we do, there are probably several conditions we should issue, but it seems to me that there are outstanding issues with Plymouth Village Water and Sewer District and some drainage issues that we may want to think on before we move forward.
Special exception.
I think we could continue this. I guess what would the board like to do? Do you want to continue the hearing until our next meeting? June, do you want to speak to this?
I had some suggested recommendations on the second page, the backside of my memo that I wrote today. So I want to go over one more explanation. I apologize for multiple pages.
When do they go for their special exception?
They've applied, so the meeting with the zoning board is March 1st.
I'd like to add one thing to the applicant that I think it's a good use of the property, and I'm not against it at all. I'm very happy that Mid-State is providing services in Plymouth. My concern is what Steve said about parking. Unless you're downtown Plymouth or you're a business owner, you really aren't aware of the parking issues that the business owners, it's their number one concern is there's not enough parking spots. And if there's any way that Mid-State and the town can work together to provide more than what you're required to, boy, it's better to kind of do this design now than later. And if there's anything that could be done that the town can do to help you, boy, your engineers might be able to come up with something that I'm not thinking of right here tonight, but there's some really smart people that you guys have working for you, and as Steve said, parking is just such a huge issue in Plymouth, and it's tough to let these opportunities go to waste, I guess.
May I jump into something, Phil?
Please.
Yeah, I think by my estimate, they're providing 49 more spots than what they're required to based on the zoning ordinance, because there are no requirements for the downtown area. But I'm certainly in favor of asking the zoning board for a little for them to figure this out in the special exception process, because this is sort of a kind of a interesting thing that because they need a special exception for the medical facility in the downtown area, the village commercial district, and the special exception criteria mean it asks them to make sure that there's adequate parking for the facility. It certainly is they're going to be able to determine if there is adequate parking for the facility as proposed. My guess is just knowing how that parking lot gets used currently by walking by many times is it's really not necessarily going to be the facility that is filling up that parking lot, but other cars that are using that lot for other things. So yeah, I'd be in favor. I guess I would be in favor of continuing this to the next to our next public hearing.
So the zoning board is going to be hearing this on the first. Are they likely to consider it the same night they receive the application with a special exception, or do they?
Yes, it may depend on the number of members that can show up that night,
Okay.
whether they choose to go forward if we don't have a full board.
It would be my thought that we should continue this until
17th.
our March 17th meeting. But I would entertain other thoughts from the board if anyone felt strongly.
Can I ask, so on my recommendations on number 3, I had a pretty strong one there, I think, of looking at this drainage. We have had external review by the town's engineer. In this case, HEB Engineers is doing the work on Main Street and Russell Street, so it makes sense to actually have them look at the plan to determine, to me, the plan needs to be revised to show what's there now in a more complete fashion, not just pulling out a 2006 plan from the, isn't adequate to show what's there now. When we have a plan from 2022 that does not show connections between the catch basins. I colored that on your, we had that kind of marked out on your thing. So there's upper parking lot, we don't know what's there based on what they've submitted as this application. So I think they should be asked to go back and finish that, to add in information. I do not know that these pumps were in the basement. Typically taking that kind of water and pumping into the town system may or may not be the appropriate, you disconnect roof drains usually and that kind of thing. So I think that needs a look at. Those may have been added after the fact and put into the town's drainage without us knowing it.
Right, possible.
And that is volume and of a concern that we need to, and also know that what is there is functioning.
So my understanding is that the goal of the current drainage issue is that there are several storm drains that tie into there are storm drains that tie into the municipal sewer system, and we want to be separating them. Just out of curiosity, is it a problem for groundwater that would be pumped out of a building to be pumped into the storm drain system, or is it only an issue if it's pumped into the municipal system, the sewage treatment system? From an engineering standpoint, is that something we can? It would seem that there might be a path forward if it's the latter. If the storm drain system can take that type of water, and there are a lot of buildings.
That the
Go ahead.
water is the perimeter drain in the basement, and that's pumped into the storm drain system, similar to how all of the other buildings in Main Street have their roof drains are tied into these storm drain systems. And a question for clarity for our standpoint, it'd be great if you guys could go through that memo just so we know what's on it, because again, we weren't privy to that information for tonight's meeting. So before we conclude tonight, we'd love to hear what's on that for our action items. Wondering too is, we have the existing plans. It's wondering what would be needed to prove that what was built is there. We would assume that in 2006, you have the trust of those officials that were in charge in 2006 to assure that what was designed and permitted, what was built. But just want to, clarify what you guys would be looking for clarity there.
We also need the right-of-way on the plan.
I think in terms of the
Easement.
drainage, though, I think the key item is to know whether or not those drains connect to something, or if they just permeate.
Yeah.
Is this an engineer's report?
Right, they can do underground testing to determine
Where
that's
they
what
go.
they do. You go in but you have the applicant do that, give us a revised plan showing the connection and understanding of what's there, and then we ask HEB to review it at their expense, money in escrow. HEB gave me an estimate of about $1,000, but that was based on an incomplete, the plan's complete, you accepted it, but at this point, because it shows some drainage, but now we're questioning where it is and where it goes. just having two catch bases with no pipe shown between them.
Yeah, four.
But what this tells me
actually.
is the pipe was removed between 2006 and 2022. If you take it literally, that's what it shows.
Which would mean that based on the 2006 agreed-upon plan, that as written here, it doesn't match that agreed-upon
Exactly.
plan and is
Right.
thus inadequate.
And we don't know
Just
if
to
it's been
clarify,
maintained and functioning.
We were able to, the town of Plymouth didn't have that plan. We were able to dig through a barn from the construction manager's storage facility, and we located that plan. So it's a new plan since the site plan had been produced. With surveying at the site, we weren't doing underground surveying of the drainage.
Didn't do that. And January 11th, I met with the engineer and Chris, as an architect, to talk about this, and the building inspector was there. We raised these issues and said that, we hadn't gone through our files here. We did find those plans, so the town has it. They just sent that to us at 4:00 this afternoon. So they did a lot, they did not include that in their original package of doing the homework of what was put in 2006. So we asked them on the 11th to do that.
So, from our perspective as a board, I'd like to share the recommendations that were provided to us, if that's okay with you, June. So the recommendations that were provided today from planning staff. Number one, since the drive-through is not part of the use of the site, discuss with the applicant the possibility of closing the curb cuts at the drive-through exit to provide more sidewalk and improve pedestrian safety. If this is agreed to, then the site plan should be revised to reconfigure parking on the south side and close the curb cut. Two, second item would be discuss winter maintenance of the steps, and we've already done that to a point, and it sounds like you'd be willing to include a statement in the site plan that would address the maintenance. Three, the planning board should request that the applicant provide details of all aspects of the drainage system on a revised site plan, along with documentation about the existing condition of the underground drainage system to ensure that the existing drainage system is functioning as designed. The revised plans and drainage condition report should then be reviewed by the town's engineer, in this case HEB engineers, at the applicant's expense. HEB engineers has provided a cost estimate of $1,000 for their review, but the amount may change depending on the details included in the revised plan. Require the applicant to meet with Plymouth Village Water and Sewer District prior to the March 17 Planning Board meeting so they can determine if the existing water and sewer lines are adequate to accommodate the proposed use. And the other recommendation was to continue the public hearing until March 17th. I'm inclined that, given the amount of work that the town is doing and the question about the status of on-site drainage that exists, I'm in favor of asking for more detail on the site plan so that what is existing, if elements of the plans that were filed and approved in 2006, if they were built correctly, we'd simply ask that those would be included on this plan. If it's found that something else was built and an as-built was never filed, we would ask that the as-built be included on this plan as current drainage conditions. And
Then we know it's functioning.
yes.
Do we also want to inquire about the easement on the upper lot, or no?
It seems like that's a separate issue right now. I mean, that would be something that would be granted to the town. It's not something that the selectmen could request it if we had a project down the road, but I'm not sure that we can require that as a condition of approval for this at this point, could we? But except that it was a condition of approval previously,
And
was
it
it
hasn't
not?
been completed, so it should be noted on this plan. So this would be the time to note it, that easement to continue out there was
So that's
not
kind of an
added in.
existing condition of a previous site plan that was never followed up on. It does benefit the town, and it may never be developed, but it would agree, it was agreed to by the previous owner.
So I should have added that as a sixth one.
Yeah, I would ask the applicant to consider whether or not including a 25-foot right-of-way for the benefit of public access across the upper parking lot in the event that other parking were to be implemented further to the north off-site. Is that something the applicant would consider? I guess we'll let you mull over it and think about it for the next meeting.
Yeah, if we could have some verbiage on that, that'd be great.
June, can you clarify what the town would be looking for in that, or
So I think if the board agrees to these recommendations, the 5 that are listed there, plus this, what about the easement from the 2006 plan? You should make that decision if you want to move ahead with those 6 things, and then I can work, Joseph and I can work with the applicant on those next steps over the next month, and then should make sure you announce continuing the public hearing until the 17th, so we don't have to renotice this. So.
yes. We have not closed the public hearing.
Right.
We're still in it.
Phil, can I make a comment as a public rather than as a planning board member?
I don't know, how does that work?
I have to step away from the
You're supposed to
board.
step away from the table officially.
Yeah.
So I would I would ask if Midstate would be willing to consider possibly not adding that meeting room on the south end of the building, to see whether there's any way to engineer an extra 10 spots. Maybe getting rid of the exam room 11 and 12 on the corner. Having 2 less of those, having your meeting room, saving you some money, and being able to work in harmony with the town to provide even more, much more spaces than what you would have to provide. That's just, the town has a river on one side and it has the university on the other. There's no more parking spaces, and they're just not making any more. And if you could help us, I think that would be huge for the town and provide a real nice relationship. Not that there isn't now, but it's just a really good suggestion, I think.
So we have 6 recommendations that were provided to the board
You want
by
to close
by
out the
planning
public
staff.
hearing?
Pardon?
Want to close out the public hearing?
No, we're still in public hearing. Is the full board in support of requesting that the applicant address these recommendations prior to our March 17th meeting, including we would ask that the applicant would continue to work with planning staff to identify appropriate language to be filed to offer a right-of-way to the town across the upper parking lot. If that was, because that was a condition of approval of a previous site plan that
Get a note on the.
should have been executed prior to now. Were there any other comments on this tonight? I think the next thing I'm going to do is continue this to our March 17th hearing. So we will continue the public hearing on the Mid-State Health Clinic and Diagnostic Center to our next hearing, which is March 17th. And I would like to thank all the representatives of Midstate for your time tonight. Thank you for presenting this. I think we have a much better picture of what's being proposed, and we look forward to seeing you in a month.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you. That moves us to item 6 on our agenda, which is informational and pre-application reviews. Do we have any new information coming through?
No.
Okay. Other business from members of the planning board and staff. Zach, do you have anything to share critically from the select board?
The only thing that I would talk about that was interesting for planning board is probably going to be addressed in this Riverside Landing note.
Okay.
Yeah, town meeting's coming.
What's the date of town meeting? Do we have it?
March.
Wednesday
My
is-
calendar. I'll tell you the wrong date if I don't. It's a Tuesday.
Is it?
No, it's a Wednesday.
Isn't it March 8th?
March
March 8th?
8th is
Or
voting.
8th is voting, and the 9th is
the
town
public
meeting.
town
Yep.
meeting. Okay, great. Thank you. Jen, would you like to give us an update on Riverside Landing and Mountain Village?
One more update about Riverside Landing.
Okay.
Probably more, actually. So we've made some progress on the conditions of approval for the Riverside Landing Phase 2 site work. As, if you recall, there was several things to be done. One was a trail easement, and one was finalizing these 2 conservation easements. There's been a lot of back and forth about the conservation easements and everything, but our attorney has, the select board agreed on November 22nd in concept to the conservation easements as they were written. So then we had those easements reviewed by the town's attorney, John Radigan, and he thought they were fine, except for some encumbrances that were listed on the parcels. So the developer, Riverside Landing's attorney, has revised the deed description that will accompany those easements, and our attorney reviewed that, those changes, and says that they are acceptable. So last Monday, on the 14th, the select board approved the 2 conservation easements with the condition that it still needs final approval by New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services because it's tied to the wetlands permit. And that prior to the closing, which was things that we had asked, had been conditions from the planning board side too, that the Riverside Landing will donate $5,000 per parcel for $10,000 total to the town to be held in a separate accounts for the purpose of monitoring the easements on these parcels. We have to get revised baseline documents, and again, DES will require that for each updated baseline documents and stewardship plans for each one. So those are standard things that come with conservation easements, and that we would want those actually at the closing when we get those easements. So it's now back in sort of the applicant's hand to come up with the money and the baseline and documents and the stewardship plans, and they know that, so some progress there. On the trail easement, we did get a trail easement a few weeks ago finally, I've been asking for it for months, and finally got it from Riverside Landing's attorney. Based on the planning board's notice of decision from back in March of 2021, Rebecca, as chair, was authorized to review that, which she did, and then also our attorney, John Radigan, reviewed it, and his comment was really that, making sure that the town understood that the expectations about constructing, managing, and maintaining the trail, because the easement's to give us the right to the trail, but not, Riverside Landing is not gonna build it. So there's a fair amount of responsibility. The easement language states that the town has to appoint a, quote, trail manager, and list some responsibilities with that. And again, there were some issues about mortgages and other encumbrances in the easement description, the deed description for this, which needed to be addressed. So Item number 3 about the easement, the encumbrances, I believe, been taken care of. The select board reviewed the easements and discussed it. I guess I was not there, but discussed it on their meeting on the 14th, last Monday, and has kind of postponed further discussion on it till the 28th, and I will be there at that meeting. One of the issues is who's going to be who in town will be responsible for building and maintaining, and there's a fair amount of responsibility that comes with it, so that's the select board to decide.
I think there's also still a question of, or a new question of, do we even want that trail easement now that it doesn't go anywhere?
Again, that may be a decision of the select board to decide to not accept the easement, and then that would sort of change our decision on it, so.
Presumably,
yeah.
we would be refunding some money to the developer if that were the case.
Funding, what?
$5,000 to $10,000 per.
No, because
those
those
are
are
trail
the
easement.
conservation easements, which
Oh,
we.
Totally separate.
conservation
This
versus
is-
trail.
this is
Sorry, thank you.
Conservation and one trail, so we're talking about the
Got
trail.
it.
So it'll be continued on the 28th, so.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question about Riverside Landing?
Sure.
Are we, just thinking about deadlines, and whenever we approved the site plan with conditions, I'm sure, that had an end date, and it sounds like maybe it was a year ago, it would just be, if they're, hopefully we gave them a little bit more time, but just want to make sure that they're not running up against a deadline that we could take care of by extending it now as opposed to waiting for it to expire and then making them jump through more hoops.
I believe they have till December 2022.
Okay.
Because I just looked at that and talked to Mike McGinley about it, actually, because I'm expecting that they might do some work there this soon, the spring or summer, because he's making progress on getting these things and had some conversations. He hasn't committed to that or told me for sure, but because we need to do construction inspection too during that, so we'll definitely need to find that out. Get more money.
Okay, thank you.
How about, do we have updates on Mountain Village Charter School?
Yep. So I sent to you a email that we got from Frank McLean. So if you remember, Planning Board on October 7th, 2021, granted an extension for the approval of Mountain Village Charter School's 10,000 square foot school building and improvements. One of the conditions was that they have until this coming October 15th, 2022. That extension's good for, they need to get active and substantial development by then, and they were to submit quarterly reports. So this is, I guess, in essence, a little bit late, but one of those reports where they basically kind of outlined what they're thinking of possibly using modular buildings instead of one building, depending on what's happening with their design. So they still would have to have well and septic and driveway and parking and that kind of thing put in.
Okay.
Which they haven't made much progress on. But they gave us that update, so you have that.
Thank you. Are there any other updates on other business from the board and staff? Are there any public comments? I'd like to open the floor to general comments from the public. Frank, please join us.
I have two subjects. One is the stormwater drainage system for Main Street. The reason they're separating this is like the one that they did on North Main Street in the 90s, is to separate stormwater drainage to the sewer line to reduce the volume of flow of stormwater through the system. Okay, the water, drinking water, and sewer line is a responsibility of Plymouth Water and Sewer. The stormwater drainage is a responsibility of the town to pay for that. So the problem with a lot of these buildings, they were put in way back when, before any of these codes and standards came around, and the method of types of construction and volume velocity index of the drainage off of a piece of land was not coordinated. So trying to find maps of what was done literally 90 years ago for anybody to be able to say what it is. I have a 1985 South Main Street drainage plan. And I have maps of 1900 of Main Street. But to know what is actually built as it was built back then, nobody really knows it's still alive. As far as downtown parking, I was on and been on the committee now for 35 years. Main Street program for parking. We did an inventory, and it was part of the 91 Green Street plan. It was formalized in 95 Green Street plan to deal with the parking issue and flow of traffic of Main Street. I did an inventory in 2000 of all of our parking system in the village commercial zone. I redid it in 2020. And we have, obviously, we don't have enough parking for our employees for the businesses that we have. We have identified 5 locations in the village commercial zone area to make additional parking. Unfortunately, Green Street's owned by Water and Sewer, and all these other places are owned by private people, and trying to coordinate the activities to get something moving so they could get through a process review from engineers, architects, land surveyors, town planning, so that we can actually get a serious plan together that meets the needs of parking for the downtown area. Reason, 1961, when the zoning started, no property in town of Main Street had sufficient land to do on-site parking. So they exempted, business owners at the time exempted the Main Street from parking systems. All other lands, like agricultural, you got 100 acres, you can try to get a car in there. But the village commercial zone, a lot of the properties were brick to brick. There was no potential for on-site parking. So they said, well, we can't comply, we just won't have it. The problem is, the one area in town that we so desperately need it relies on the fact that we have to talk about we, us, and our parking rather than I, me, and mine as an individual business. But trying to get people to the table to agree with that concept has been disappointing. Just right now, 2 lines, white lines on Main Street cost the town $150 a year to maintain. There are 4 agencies that have regulations for those 2 white lines. Code of Federal Regulations, state RSAs, municipal orders, and industry standards. And trying to get us to comply with all 4 levels has been unique. So it's a work in progress, and it's the problem with trying to get parking in one area and not appropriate review by this board is you have unintended consequences of something you think you're going to help out by trying to make changes or do something else without the proper review of all of the elements involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Can I ask you a question? You did those studies. Did you come up with a number of how many spots?
Yes.
What is
we
that
have
number?
505 spots on Main Street and Green Street, all the businesses, and we require, because we have 170 businesses, you're required to have 504, but that doesn't include any customers. So they'll have to park in Holderness and walk over. But the other thing that affects us, like the federal codes, transportation codes, which are reflected in our state code, is our Main Street was never surveyed, was never dimensioned, does not qualify, it was never accepted by the state or the town except by default. The state called it Daniel Webster Highway, Route 3, and we call it Main Street, but technically you cannot park parallel on Main Street because there's insufficient lane width to do so, except that it's been grandfathered. So one of the things that we were trying to do in the Plymouth Insight is a 6-foot offset. So in 2020, myself and the previous planner had talked to McLean to try to see about getting a setback to get that sidewalk paralleled and take that Coke bottle effect out of our Main Street, and COVID hit. So that was I haven't got, but I had all the paperwork for that. I did all of the butters, the number of butters to that site for the Plymouth Inn site, did the drainage evaluation, and I have access to a lot of old maps, which I shared with the town highway person and supervisor. And come to find out, when I started going door to door, inventorying every parking space, I started looking at drainage systems. And there's literally physically no drainage in the Plymouth Inn site. So that water literally runs from Russell Street all the way down, and every spring, the water comes down that slope, and the dirt and grass go out on the main street. So as I did it, and then I presented it to the town highway superintendent, I said, hey, I think we have some issues here. And so that's when the town didn't have any money for the engineering. It wasn't even started. So they pushed back the date for the water and sewer. But I've identified several places to work with business owners to work with them to double up, get a economic development grant or whatever to address this issue. And I'll give you an example. In 2000, when we were doing the first inventory, Concord, New Hampshire did this same thing, except business community came together in writing and said, we have a problem not of our own making and we can't solve it. And they got the Eagle Square parking garage for $6 million. We said we didn't have a problem. So we have a problem. And so I have a lot of resources in my office because I do research in the town of Plymouth, and could facilitate a lot of this process dealing with this subject.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak at this point?
I add one?
Sure, sure.
In regards to I should have mentioned this earlier, there is a public hearing on February 28th to review the preliminary plans for the downtown drainage project, which is Russell, Warren, and South Main Street. And I have a copy of the plans. They were supposed to get put on the town's website. I realized that I don't think they are, so we'll try to get that available. And they do, there's been an awful lot of work, preliminary engineering report done in 2020, a lot of survey work that addresses road width and identifies existing water lines, sewer lines, and storm drainage. So this is not about separating stormwater going into the sewer lines to the wastewater treatment plant. That work was done for the most part at some other point. There could still be some connections that will be discovered or determined once construction starts, but for the most part, they have identified and surveyed existing lines and know quite a bit about it, so it's all on the plan, so.
What time is the hearing?
5 o'clock, 5:15, I don't know,
Okay.
That's February what?
28th. 5:15. Yep.
5:15, okay.
Josh McAllister from HEB Engineers should be here for that presentation.
You have a question from the audience?
Question? Come on up, Matt. Sure.
February what again?
28th.
5:15.
I just want to make a comment. I think it is important that we do scrutinize everything that comes in front of the board regarding Main Street and the parking situation. Not saying that it is or isn't the place here, but with the application tonight. But like everyone said tonight, the parking is so limited that scrutinizing every single thing that happens downtown just for that one extra spot here and there could be beneficial in the long run. And also, if anyone caught the governor's State of the State address today, really exciting news for planning boards and planning for towns if he can get some legislation to go through for monies for towns later on. So if you didn't catch it, it's a good listen. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Unless anyone else has any business for us, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Rebecca?
I moved that we adjourn. Did I miss, or was I supposed to second it? I couldn't quite hear.
No,
I'll second.
thank you. All those in favor?
We almost went going home.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Aye.
Have a nice evening.